the talk that I'm going to give you is called Mega Music Patch Final version 2.1 not working, which is an allusion to the fact that when I start a max patch, I have these dreams that it's going to do everything and solve my current problem or problems, and then it never quite seems to work out that way. But so I'm going to show you what I've been working on, and I'm going to tell you why I've been working on it. And I don't have that much planned, so you're welcome to ask questions, and it's quite possible that I won't explain myself very well, and if you ask a question that might help everybody understand, it might help me understand what I'm trying to say. So for a long time, maybe 15, 20 years, I've been using Macs, and I've made so many different environments to achieve like my playing with a jazz band patch and my granular patch and all these kind of patches that exist for a kind of specific reason. I was in a band called Polar Bear for about 12 years, and every album there was a new patch, and I was always dreading that we would do a show where we would have to do like a couple of songs from every album, because then it would have been so technically difficult to perform it, and I don't think the people in the band ever understood what a fucking nightmare it was, and it was over like 4 different computers as well, maybe like 4 different versions of Macs. Luckily, we split up before we did the kind of mega greatest hits tour. And then, so that's one problem, and then another problem is that I've always made albums that have been essentially sort of kind of tape music on a computer kind of thing, where it's been I've recorded a sound, I've made a sound, and then I've looked at that, thought about it, and treated it, and maybe created a little world for that sound to live in, maybe using other sounds, and so kind of a slow, sort of studious approach, and it was the way that I felt like I needed to make my music at that point for the last, well, I've always done it like that way, but it means that performing it live is really difficult. You have to find I feel like I want to find a compelling way to perform my music, and quite often it's felt like either there's too much backing stuff, or the track is too kind of concrete in where it's going to go. So I decided that I was going to make this patch, which would be an environment to make my music as well as perform my music. And it's not finished, and it's not even working, but it's probably working well enough to do the gig tonight. But we'll see. So I thought I'd really quickly go through what is this stuff. So there's a kind of max patch, which is the hub, and then there are various controllers that I've, like, some of which I've built, this is like a kind of really DIY sort of wind controller, which I just thought, oh, I'd like to try and build one. and it was actually quite easy. And then this is a thing which I call the light interface, which you control by shining lights on it. And I've done a lot of work for the last 6, 7 years, sort of improv stuff and playing. I found a way of playing my albums through it, whereby the album would be split and I could shine a light and bring certain bits of the album out. And there were some quite clever patches that were all synthesis based, and it would kind of be, it would look at your gesture and it could tell if you were doing a rhythm, then it would play with you. Interesting little rabbit hole. Got a drum, sort of a Keith McMillan bop pad, which is like a kind of drum pad thing. This, which is like lots of knobs that you can tell them. You can control the colours and the stuff from Max, which is quite useful at times. And then there's a modular setup, which is, I don't know how many. It's basically 3 voices. So, and a voice is an oscillator and a filter connected together. And there's a couple of filters that I can send stuff from Max to. And there's like loads of interfacing. So I can send 24 channels and I can get something like 24 channels back or something. There's lots of channels. Have I missed anything out? You shouldn't know. I should know this. Is there any questions so far? Good. So I'll just quickly show you where the Max patch is at. Apologies, it's a bit messy. This is a kind of sequencer which I built, which I want to show you later on. It's a kind of sequencer which is, you can have sort of non-linearities in it, and it's really easy to do some nice things that make it not loopy, which is the really good and bad thing about sequencers. So basically it's like 10 lanes and you can send any message you want with it. And then this is like, you'll see this stuff all the time. This is like some of the parameters that are available. So you've got the bop pad stuff, you've got some LFOs, sequences. This T thing is the tracker, and there's 10 channels for those. And LDRs are the outputs from the light interface. There's a preset system, so you can build an environment, a little world to create noises in, and then save it. And it's not necessarily going to play you a track back, but it's got the setups there for you to work within. This is for managing the analog voices. I'm just going to tune them actually. That would be a good idea. All the audio signals come into the matrix. You've got all the inputs across the top and all the outputs across the side. Yeah, that's pretty ugly. The LFOs and some more sequencey things. This is where the outputs, the controllers come in. So then the light interface should be working. It's probably not so great in these with the.
Dim the lights.
Would you mind?
No problem.
The rest of this is awful. Ringo is a drum machine. This is a drum machine. There's probably, oh yeah, and this. So these are some sort of electronic digital voices that go with the analog voices. You can use them or not. Yeah, that's then. So yeah, all the stuff on the right is basically kind of prototype or I didn't like it, or it needs changing. Anyway, I'll have a look. So this is just a little patch I made when I got this. I got this quite recently, and it's just a root note, and then the partials of that. So basically the frequency times by 2, by 3, and it's kind of sounds musical, or it sounds. But then by the time we start getting up here. And I think it's really beautiful. We can change we can slowly take the way that the fundamental is multiplied. It's just a kind of experiment, but it allowed me to create some interesting sort of actions with this. So you can record and they're not quantized, so you get, we can modulate them. Jumped back to the original tone. Something else. And then we can shift the fundamentals that these are acting on. Does it make sense? It's easier if you just turn one on. And then you can do these nice, when you put different harmonics in, you get really different effects. Anyway, that was a little experiment, and it's just using oscillators in Max, and then I thought it would be really nice to show you why I've got the modular. So I'm just going to send those oscillators into one filter in here, which sounds like this. So it makes a kind of, I don't know, it adds a kind of chaos that it's quite hard to code. No, it's one of the cheapest filters you can buy. It's a wasp filter. Oh, yeah, by Dopfer. It's really lovely. Okay, and then so I thought, at the moment I'm making stuff and thinking I want to make stuff that I might then turn into a piece. So this is basically what all these little things are. The next is like an idea that I had about sequencing. And I thought it would be really nice if I could drive the sequencer myself. So I think these are analog voices, and they're driven by just hitting the drum pad. And there's sort of set, at the moment, there's set patterns on each. So the right one drives this right-hand sequencer. The spring reverb is making a noise. And just turn the spring off for a sec. Oh no, let's leave it on. That would be fun. And then there's another pattern on the left which is quite simple as well. Which is interesting. From such simple patterns you can get nice interactions. And then it's interesting, there's a bit of latency. I struggled to get the patch working on lower latencies, and there's a bit too much. Is it noticeable for you?
Not really.
I think because this is sending messages to through these audio interface and then back, the latency feels a bit long for me. But if you put an electronic voice with it, then it's more snappy. Too much bass. Where's my thing? All right, I want to show you the wind controller.
You said that they had sort of non-linearities built into these sequences. Is that something that we're seeing now? Is there another way that they can be less loopy, or is it mainly this way of driving them kind of manually?
Yeah, you can basically, you can write in commands that can access kind of all these sort of like reversing, scrambling. One thing can tell the other thing to do something. I think it would get a bit technical to maybe to go into it now, but yeah, you can.
You can have them edit themselves and kind of.
Yeah, you can.
They can do programmatic things.
Yeah, they can. It can. You can send this selection box anywhere you want, and then get it to do something in that. So you can.
The first step of that right one, yeah, that one.
This one, yeah. So it has So the way the way that it kind of works is that you just write a number in, which is can equate to whatever you want. That was interesting. So you can write like this. So the first step has this kind of thing where you can loop round various notes, and then still sounds very loopy. So you can sort of take some of the clocks out. Yeah, so that's a kind of basic way that you can work with it. There's also things called conditionals which allow you to turn specific things on and off. Can you hear me over there? Because I realise I'm talking that way, which is really rude. I didn't think about that. I'm going to show you we'll have a jazzy, we'll have a saxophone interlude. It's not working. Which one is it? So this has kind of started as an experiment, and then I have to say I got really addicted to playing it. It's sort of a guilty pleasure. So it's a teensy controller inside, and then a kind of pressure sensor, and then the teensy comes with these capacitive sensors which work really great for buttons. Sorry, that's a bit rude. like it. It's got a kind of, you can make it sound really good and really bad within the same breath, which is, I think, a sign of a good instrument.
John, what about the fader?
Fader doesn't, well, the fader can do whatever. I mean, you can map it to something. It's not at the moment mapped. I don't think it is.
Could you take us roughly through the mapping that's going on there?
Yes.
Like what's coming from the wind controller part, what data do you get and what do you do with it?
I'll show you. So this, so there's there's some, God, yeah. It's quite involved actually, because you have to decide how to, is that me? So the data coming in is what you see there, sort of in the center of the screen. So you've got the blow thing. Oh, it's got suck as well. So you can suck in and it'll go to 0. I've not found a good use for that, but I'm sure I will. It's got a kind of X, Y, Z accelerometer. It's got these 2 pressure sensors on the back. And then it's actually got a kind of idea of how hard you're pressing on these little copper pad things. And then the fader at the end actually does work, but it's not mapped to anything. And then, so the mapping for this is not there, is here. Now, sorry, but you can see the notes are sort of hard wired into this thing called wrangle, which is a way of keeping sort of snapping to a pitch. So you can play whatever you want and it'll be whatever you choose. I mean, it could be chromatic as well. That sounded wrong. No. Ooh. It's weird because it's the fingering is binary. Yeah. Which it feels weird, but it's also like I've learned how to go up, but I haven't learned how to come down that scale. It's really like a head fuck. That's the wrong note. I don't quite understand what's going on. Anyway, not going to worry about that. And then, so if I hover over these things, you'll be able to see that the bottom pressure sensor, that's a really bad representation of what's actually happening, but basically it just goes up and down, and that is controlling this wavetable, which I made by hand by blowing down a tube and getting different harmonics, and then I basically play those harmonics on this bottom thumb thing, so it sounds like a weird, like mutant electronic version of the actual tube. There's a couple of ones. There's one that's made of guitars, because you can kind of pinch harmonics on these. And then there's a couple. The thing's called Piston Honda, which is which is an old module that I had, which has got wavetables in it. So I started off just by sampling those wavetables, and they don't sound great. So I sort of made these harmonic wavetables myself, and it's just basically you record it and then chop out one cycle and then paste in the next one. Not too tricky. This is called Tuba for Weird Overtone. Pressures, I think pressures mapped a little bit to that. So you get a little bit more higher frequency as you blow harder. Oh yeah, and the tilt is pitch. It seems to affect, there's two different oscillators. There's that sort of sub one, and then there's the main wavetable one. And it seems to make them beat against each other, which is super unintended but nice. Which is lovely. Then there's, I mean, that's basically the mapping, I think. You can, so the fingering is additive, so each finger has a value and it just adds all those values together, and you can change. Okay, hello. What do I have to do? Oh, I got it. So this is the mapping for the fingers. So they're both, like the left and right hand, are the same. You can change it, but considering that the notes underneath this can change anyway, it gets super confusing if you change the fingering and the notes and the scales that it's playing. It's meant to be a bit confusing. And then last night I thought, oh, it'd be brilliant if it was not tied to the scale, but the scale could change in real time, and you could make it follow chords and stuff. So I played some chords in on the MIDI guitar, which are here. So if I put those in, I've invented a thing called the pit, which is where you can go coal mining for melodies, and let's demo that. See if that works. So 6. What was 6? Oh, I haven't showed you the light interface. I think I jumped one. Oh well. Okay, I'll just quickly show you. So basically, you can change the scale under the fingers in real time. So I'm just playing the same here, but obviously you don't have to. And it should be spitting out those things into here as well. Yes. This should be should be So now it's mapped just to go through them in sequence using this one here. So you can sort of remap it. You can hold so it doesn't interrupt a note, so you can play wrong notes over it, which is nice. If you start a note and keep it going, it won't correct you, but if you keep moving your fingers, it will pick notes that are in the right place. I think I'll quickly show you the light interface, and then basically the way that it's set up at the moment is it's in its most basic form, but it's a form which works quite well for performance because your performative input is really clear on the output. So I can just, it's set up as 16 filters, and you can play a sound into it, and then it just basically turns the sound up on whatever frequency, whatever kind of bands you're hitting. So just pick a sound. And then it should come out. And the sound just sounds like this. That's the full kind of and it's kind of a simple, quite a simple mapping. Did I explain it okay how the mapping works? So that's the very low end of the sound, and it just goes up. So very simple. But with all the other bits and bobs, I think it doesn't have to be very complicated. One thing I do that I'm trying to do for the show tonight is use, I've got this album that I made, and there's lots of field recordings in them. So they usually start with a field recording, then a sort of a piece of music comes out of it. So I'm going to try tonight and use them as kind of source material and then I can route them through a sort of delay or reverb. So not sure, yeah, I'm not sure how much I like playing the whole track through rather than just a sound, but we'll see. Maybe it sounds all right and I'll go on with it. I don't know. Yeah, so that's the light interface. And the good thing is that it kind of works, it seems to be working. So, are there any questions? I'm sure there are. Yes.
One small question. When you send different notes to the, if we rewind to when you were with the pick and everything, sending different notes and chords to the different elements. When you send them to this knob bank, you know, does it change the functionality? So it stops being a harmonic series, and then it just becomes those different chords.
Yeah.
Oh.
It just gets a note from that chord in each kind of slot,
Yeah.
but you can still do this, which is, oh, don't close it, John. That's everything. I'm still getting quite kind of used to how this works. Yeah, so hopefully it'll work. So different mode. Yeah, so now he's got a note from whatever pool of notes is in there in each knob. Yeah. And you can still do that thing where you make the positions climb or fall. cheesiest thing in the world. I love it. So that thing is the previous oscillator modulates the next oscillator in the, which is quite.
You can do that from the controller. Like you can do that assign kind of frequency modulation from the controller.
Yeah. The controller's really kind of brilliantly set up so that there's a function, there's a value for each knob, and then if you press it and turn it, there's a value there as well. Mm-hmm. And then it's just got it's built in a way that you can get quite a lot out of it. But yeah, that just turns up. And then the press function on that knob is how quickly the volumes change. And like the press function on this knob is some wobbliness. PA.
Two quick questions. One is stupid. How do you tune your modular oscillators? And that's the boring one. And the most complicated one is, how did you code your sequencer with all the, like, that sounds very exciting. It's the right room to geek in. So first question, how do you tune your analog stuff?
It's a kind of gen patch that has a frequency counter in, and then it kind of basically sends out control voltage, and then just.
So it's your own stuff. Yeah,
it's so horrible. I was doing it, and at the same time, my friend James was doing his. We've got quite similar setups in a way, and he ended up making this incredible tuning thing that he can tune it in real time, even with kind of FM on it. It's incredible what he did, but I didn't understand it, so I thought I'd best stick with what I've got. So this gen thing goes into the p shit object. Actually, it's not that bad. So basically, it measures an error between what it's asking for, and then it changes the CV by like a big step, and then has a look, and then gets progressively smaller. The reason that object is called shit is because I wanted to do all this in gen, but it was completely doing my nut in. So I ended up with this horrible way of working out when it had reached its pitch. But there's probably much better ways of doing it. And then, so it'll save all those in there. It sounds beautiful when you listen to it. And it sounds similar to the way that expert sleepers do it, but I kind of wanted to have a go at it and see if I could do it. I did it. And your second question, PA, was?
The sequencer looks quite impressive in terms of features and everything. I wondered, what's the engine under the hood? Is it like?
Just wait till you see this. So it's all built with the LCD object. Which
deprecated LCD object.
Well, they say so, but they can't because like all my patches will break. Yeah, and it's such a good object. I mean, I can't remember how this works. So there's a little bit of code for every operation by the look of it. There's a little box. So there's like, I mean, it looks fairly simple, doesn't it? It's actually, for me, reasonably neat, but this is horrid, isn't it? Really nasty.
So because we won't open the patch, can I do a meta question then? You seem to say often that you don't remember how things work. So is it because you start with an idea, you dig as deep as you can, you finish it, and then you start on another thread, and once it works, it's set and forget?
In terms of the patch, or like playing it?
In ours, or no, like so this sequence, you've done it, it's involved coding, and then you started to work deep and make it work.
Yeah.
You say you don't remember how it works, which means that you just, once it's done, you park it, you don't iterate through development.
I have a bit, so occasionally I'll get to the point where, so like the problem with this is to get to a point where I can start making music with it, I need to kind of close it off in a way, because the way that the storage of the presets works can get really messed up if you take stuff out. So I want to be really careful I don't take anything out once I've started writing stuff that I like. I keep finding stuff that's so good, and then I'm like, oh, I can't save it. So that occasionally I've found stuff that's been buggy, and I've changed it, and I've found features that would be great to have. And in fact, I thought I was going to do the pit feature where it follows the chord in there, but actually it didn't. It was really easy just to pop it in between into the sort of quantizing object. Yeah, did that answer it?
Yeah, that answers perfectly.
Yeah.
So you have a coding cycle, and then you start making music, and you try to not touch it because you want to save the state, and it becomes an instrument.
It feels like super flowy when I'm coding, and it's just, I don't really. I think that's why they're often so messy, because if I just stop and tidy up, it just breaks that flow, and then I'm so into putting it into working with it that I want to tidy up. This is actually quite tidy because I put it on my website, so you can, like, it's on the website, a link to it. And I know a couple of people do use it, because actually Max has very limited sequencing, really. And I hope that they'll make something like it. Sometimes they do borrow other people's ideas, so maybe it will. But it works super well. There's like loads of horrible stuff, like I like working with cols more than dicts. So there's bits where, to make it work with the pattern storage, the col has to go into a dict, or else it won't get. Yeah, but it's actually much easier than just saving loads of text files from cols. That would be really hard to manage. It's nice. Everything goes into one huge pattern storage object, and it sort of seems to be working. So, touch wood. Yeah.
When you were saying about when you're coding, you sort of get into the flow of it, and you don't have time to tidy up. I was just wondering. So I tend to do that in my patching, and then particularly Max, it ends up being, there's so many messages going all over the place, and I can't follow them anymore. How do you make big patches that don't just sort of get out of control?
You keep the out of control bits in a room.
Okay.
And then if that becomes too unpleasant to live in, then you just knock it down and start again.
Right, okay.
But you don't make your whole house a mess.
Right. Okay.
So
they're like contained messes.
Yeah. So that I knew that I would have to have some way of these things communicating with each other. So there's a carefully thought out way that you can create a send. And I knew that there would be a lot of... Max has the audio and the message, which is difficult to manage conceptually because there are two like routing, and I don't really want two. I would like one routing, but with short of turning all your messages into signals, then difficult. Or maybe the other way around. It'd be funny, turn all the audio into messages. Yeah, but I would say, I mean, I'm quite a messy person. I get really into stuff, and I don't want to. I just want to. I do it in the studio, total mess. But it's fine. It's just about not spewing out.
Keeping that mess in separate boxes and having nice outputs and inputs, at least so like have a beat patch that can be messy in one part, but
look all right on the surface.
Yeah, look all right on the surface. Yeah.
I mean, so it's fine. At the end of the day, then all I'm bothered about is having an experience where I make sound and that goes out there. That's all I'm actually bothered about.
Yeah.
And like being an Uber coder or super whatever, it's not really. I'm not. Never. I don't know. Not that bothered about it. Sometimes it's useful if someone else can follow your code. So if you're making code that someone else might see, I would make a lot more effort. Apart from that patch that I gave you, which yeah. Oh man, you know my lies.